E na mana, e na reo, e ra rangatirama, tēnā koutou katoa. Te whare e tūnei, tēnā koe. Ko Ashley Shearer, tōku ingoa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Shearer, and I'm the Principal Advisor for the Youth Strategy at Corrections. It's nice to see a few familiar faces here today, and some of you I've had the fortune of working alongside, including my co-presenter, Philip Spear. So today I'm going to tell you about youth in corrections and what we're trying to do to improve their outcomes. And I'm also going to tell you about the Youth Crime Action Plan and how our collective efforts has the potential to reduce offending by children and young people from the earliest opportunity and to prevent them from even coming into the correction system. So when I first took this role, I was invited to a forum at the youth unit at Hawke's Bay Regional Prison. And during our meeting, the unit manager called in a few young men to come and speak to us about their experiences. And all four of them spoke about pretty distressing childhoods. They all spoke about how they knew each other from youth justice residences. And not one of them spoke about where they saw their futures. After they sat down, I could see one of the young men shuffling around in his seat. I could see our corrections officer looking over thinking, oh, here we go, what's happening now? But he gave him the floor again, and he stood up and he said to us, you know, sometimes you'll see some of us out on the street and you'll ask us how we're doing. And we'll say to you, we're all good, but we're not all good. We're really suffering, and we need you to be loud for us. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that for them today. So before we talk about youth in corrections, it's important to think about our wider context. And as many of you will be aware, corrections is facing some major challenges at the moment. And this has pretty much everything to do with a very rapidly increasing prison population and unprecedented numbers of people in prison. So as this graph here shows, which is up to the end of 2017, well, that just really clearly demonstrates that. And today we're sitting at about 10,700 people in prison, which also demonstrates how fast that number is rising. So this undoubtedly puts considerable strain on the whole system, so not just in custody, but also for the community. So where do our young people sit and our youth sit in that mix? Well, over here we can see that we have approximately 1,900 youth in corrections who are aged under the age of 20. And around 350 of them on average are in custody at any time, and about 1,500 in the community. But what I find really staggering is if you look at the next age up between 20 to 24, and that these numbers just about quadruple. So that is a really interesting rise in numbers. But in all of this, why even have a focus on youth in corrections? A lot of people think that it's just too late, that we're just the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. But actually what recent studies into brain science have shown is that late adolescence is actually a really great opportunity to make a difference for young people. And it's not just because the frontal lobe, which is responsible for things like decision-making and self-regulation and understanding consequences, continues to develop into your mid-20s. But also, as Dr. Lawrence Steinberg and other neuroscientists have found, that next to early childhood, this is a period when the brain has its most neuroplasticity, and it undergoes some major rewiring as a young person's identity formation starts to strengthen, and also as they prepare for adulthood. So I think this is not just an opportunity, but it's also for us a really big responsibility to make sure that we're giving young people the right support and guidance to help them to transition into their adulthood. And interestingly, in June 2016, the United States National Institute of Justice published an environmental scan of responses to young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 in their justice system. And their work particularly focused on efforts to reduce recidivism. And what they found was that knowledge of brain development by staff across all disciplines, including in the community, was one of the things that made the biggest difference. And this was because it changed their understanding of youth behaviour, and it therefore changed the way that they interacted with them. But youth in corrections have a number of factors which affect normal, healthy development, and these are outlined in this slide. So, as you can see, about 70% and over 70% of youth in corrections have either a care and protection or youth justice history, or both. And just last week we took a sample of 147 of our youth under 20 in custody, and 68% of them had no recorded education qualifications. We've also identified that 17 to 24-year-old male prisoners have our highest rates of diagnosis of current substance abuse disorder at 55%. And a recent study into traumatic brain injury in prisons has also found that the majority of males in custody have sustained a head injury, and that is 1 in 5 before the age of 15. And we just recently, as a result of the study, have been doing some screening in one of our youth units. And of 40 young people screened, I think we found 5 who could not recall having a head knock or a brain injury of any description. So, but we also, the Laura Ferguson Trust, who's been doing the study with us, came and did an education session with our young men in the unit. And irrespective of whether they had been identified as having a head injury or not, they reported that their level of functioning, their cognitive functioning, was of the lowest they'd seen, irrespective. So this is about the other compounding factors like the drug and alcohol abuse, like fetal alcohol syndrome, like abuse and neglect in childhood. So what about offending by young people? And actually what we see is young people's offending is actually pretty prolific. So 50% of total lifetime harm is committed by the age of 23. And youth under 20 released from custody from our prisons are 20% more likely to be reconvicted and 15% more likely to be re-imprisoned compared to any other prison releases. And over here, we can see that this is also a snapshot from 2016-17 financial year, that youth under the age of 20 had the lowest parole rate of any parole population in corrections. And so this was looking at out of 159 males, only 23% had a successful parole, and 0 out of our 5 cases of females. And there could be a few reasons for that, but one of the most significant reasons is that actually a lot of our young people have nowhere to go and no social support structure. So, what about our facilities? What are we doing? Or what are our facilities like to respond to youth? Well, actually in corrections, we have 2 custodial youth units for 17-year-olds and for our very vulnerable 18 and 19-year-olds. And these youth units are based at Hawke's Bay Regional Prison and Christchurch Men's Prison. I should note that we are fortunate to have an arrangement with Oranga Tamariki that for young people under the age of 17 sentenced to imprisonment in the adult court, that typically they remain in a youth justice residence rather than coming into a corrections facility. So, having noted that, there are 70 places across both our youth units. And so this means, if we recall, that there are about 350 young people under the age of 20 in custody, the majority of them are actually placed outside of youth units, and that's in the mainstream prison. We have no youth unit placements for young women, and that's because typically the numbers of young women, recalling that our youth units are for 17-year-olds, are really small. So that means that we don't have enough numbers to form a unit for our young women, but because we try and separate them from the older adult population, they become quite isolated in our system. So that's something we have to be aware of, and that other point I've made. So this brings me to the corrections youth strategy. And I think at this point it's clear why we need to concentrate on youth in corrections. And in 2013, recognising this, Corrections established its youth strategy, which had the vision to unlock young people's potential and for young people to leave us educated and employed and with a sense of belonging. And for that, we have tried to be aspirational. Obviously, the vision is broad, and we've tried to anchor ourselves against these three priority areas. We've got some which are forming some of our solid building blocks. So we're trying to establish our youth units as centres of excellence. We're trying to support our staff, particularly our youth champions, to have exceptional engagement, and that is with a strong focus on understanding brain development and equipping our staff with the skills to interact effectively with our young people. And we aim to have world-leading rehabilitation and reintegration services. And actually we've been quite fortunate in recent times, and just particularly since last year, in securing funding to start to improve, or to start to try and improve outcomes for our young people. So already since 2013 we've been able to train almost 300 frontline staff as youth champions, and that's across all our frontline roles. And since 2017 we've implemented a new high-risk youth rehabilitation program at Christchurch Men's Prison, which is called the Modi 2 Modi Order, originally piloted in Korowai Manaaki Youth Justice Residence. We've had a 2-year graduated driver license pilot program across 6 community correction centres in South Auckland, targeting young people under the age of 25, and we've had some good success with that. 85 young people have achieved their driver's license in that pilot. And that's with 5 of those being a full license. We've also recently introduced new education tutors and soon to be introduced youth activity coordinators in both our youth units. And we're also introducing an intensive youth alcohol and drug program. Last year we also piloted a healthy relationships program for our young women at Auckland Women's Prison, which we're hoping to implement more widely. And of course we're also committed to trying to improve outcomes for young Māori in our system, and this is recognising that their identity as Māori is critical to their overall well-being and success. And I have to say that most of our recent achievements have been through the leadership of our Māori staff, of many of our Māori staff in particular, who are able to draw on te ao Māori, on tikanga, and on community connections with providers, iwi, and marae as well, to support young people's reintegration. So overall, we can't do this on our own, nor should we. And we've been fortunate to have some really great opportunities to collaborate with some other providers and community members. And being able to have these collaborations help to create more stimulating environments for our young people, and they help to better respond to their needs and aspirations, and also to support their reintegration back into the community. And so, just to point out a couple of exciting opportunities that we've had recently, we've introduced the Duke of Edinburgh Award into both our youth units and with young women at Auckland Women's Prison. And we have 3 young men graduating with their Gold Award next month for the first time, so that's quite a good achievement for us, and particularly for them. And we've also had a really exciting collaboration last year with St John's College in Hastings, who partnered with our young men in Hawke's Bay Prison as part of their Young Enterprise scheme. So these are just really great examples of how we can collaborate and make a difference for our young people. So this actually brings me to the next part of my presentation, which is on the Youth Crime Action Plan. And as we can see from, if we look at youth in corrections, there's clearly several opportunities for us to do more earlier, and this includes across areas like education and health. So the Youth Crime Action Plan was established in October 2013, and it was established as a 10-year action plan taking a multi-agency collective approach to children and young people in the justice system. And this slide here shows all the government agencies who are represented as part of the Youth Crime Action Plan. So it was preceded by a period of community consultation, which agency representatives travelled together from, as we like to say, Dunedin, Dunedin to Kaitaia. And we listened to a number of frontline staff, community providers with a strong focus on Māori providers and whānau to understand how we could improve services in the youth justice system. And after we worked through everything that we heard, 3 areas emerged very clearly for us. And those areas now underpin our actions under the Youth Crime Action Plan. And those are to reduce escalation in the justice system, to provide early and sustainable exits from the youth justice system, and to partner with communities to improve outcomes. We've managed to achieve some good things in this time. We have established the Youth Crime Action Plan Toolkit, which is a toolkit to support partnerships with communities and to provide information on developing local action plans. We also developed a Kia Mau evaluation tool for evaluating small-scale initiatives at a local level. And this was largely because what we heard as well when we were going around talking to communities is that there were a lot of providers and community groups who were talking about really great things that they were doing, but they just didn't have the resources or capacity to be able to evaluate and provide evidence of the good things that they were doing. So we've established a tool to enable them to do that. And we've also continued to consult with communities throughout to see what our successes are and also how we're tracking and where we need to improve. And this included a youth voice project at the Youth Justice Residence in Rotorua. Thanks to Kelsey Brown, we were able to get some really great feedback from the young people, and this is some of their work, which is actually the originals are, I think, still showcased in room 1.3. Is that right? Yeah, if you'd like to go and see those. Of course, many things have happened since the implementation of YCAP, and not least of all the major change of child, youth and family to Oranga Tamariki, which has a direct impact on the youth justice system. But throughout these changes, one of our biggest successes has been to retain our multi-agency steering group and our youth justice governance group, with the original agency still represented. So this has allowed us to remain connected and agile to provide input and perspectives into these changes. And another one of our successes has been the development of a youth justice minimum data set, which uses data from the Ministry of Justice, Oranga Tamariki, New Zealand Police, and Corrections. And this data set allows us to track how we're doing and to monitor trends. And as we heard from our previous presentation, the good news is that overall offending by young people has dropped significantly over the past few years. And between 2009 and 2016, the offending rate for children and young people has more than halved. The reducing rate has more than halved. So that's a significant decrease. But we still see that the proportionate rate of serious offending has increased, and also that the rates of custodial remand in youth justice residences is remaining stubbornly high. So these need to be areas that we focus on and tackle. And of course, another major change, which is just on our horizon, is including 17-year-olds in the youth justice system from July 2019. And again, this is going to require us to really come together to prepare for that. If we look at all the things that we've heard today and we look back at young people in corrections and the issues that face them, it's clear that doing things from the earliest opportunity will help to reduce reoffending and hopefully prevent young people coming into the correction system at all. And so I often think about that young man who spoke to us at the Hawke's Bay Youth Justice Residence and what he said. And I remember him being quite a stocky young guy, had a twinkle in his eye, and a bit of a trickster, you could see that. But I admired his courage for standing up and speaking on behalf of other young people. And just earlier this week, completely out of the blue, for no related reason, my attention was drawn to him, and I saw a recent picture of him. So this was about 2 years ago that I'd seen him or met him, and he must have been about 17 at the time. And his picture, he was gaunt, he had hollow eyes, he had no expression, and he had a massive gang insignia tattooed across the middle of his face. And it's a reminder to me that there's still a lot for us to do. And so I'd like to end with a whakatauki, which I think is relevant to our discussion today, but is clearly relevant to most things that we do. And that is, Ngaki te raurau, no te raurau, ka ora ai te iwi. With your basket and my basket, the people will live. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.